thanks for what they survived. A personality, a VIP, history in the headlines. Whatever happened to, let's get the latest news. Hey, whatever happened to you? Hey, whatever happened to you?
Welcome to Hey Whatever Happened To, and the segment that has 30-minute program each week where we highlight a new celebrity or a different celebrity from Kansas or with a strong Kansas connection. I'm Doug Thompson with co-host Roger Thompson. Roger, we're about halfway through the series this year for the new segment called Hey Whatever Happened To. And we started out with, the first one we did was Vivian Vance from Cherryville. And Vivian, of course, was Ethel Mertz off the old I Love Lucy show. And each week we have done a different celebrity, and we thought this would be a good time to kind of recap where we are, because the viewer can, if you've missed any of these shows, we'll try and rerun a little later in the season, but you can also go to our website with heywhateverhappenedto.org, and you would see that the shows are there. You can click on to any of those shows and watch them at your convenience, so you don't have to watch them just exclusively on television. But as we started on this new show, I certainly didn't know we had so many celebrities that became of national prominence out of the state of Kansas until we started on the show. Did you?
No, I didn't either. And seems to be a common thread that runs through all of these celebrities we've done, and one of them is that they are humble, genuine people. And it just amazes me that the cooperation we get from family members, from friends, and from those celebrities that are lucky enough to still be alive, and they come in and they put up with my ineptness sometimes in asking questions, and trying to get to the essence of who they are. But that just impresses me, that people with this type of notoriety can be so genuine and real. And I guess it all comes from the fact that they're all Kansans and they have that common bond.
Yeah, I think that you're right, and they have tolerated us with our questions and things. And matter of fact, I think it has made them feel much more comfortable that we're not trying to create controversy or anything with them, because as they've told their stories, there's one reoccurring theme with it. They all realize how lucky they were to have had the opportunity, how the timing, all of the alignment was just correct. And it's kind of like the book you gave me for my birthday with Divine Alignment, and how sometimes those things line up because the good Lord gives you the opportunity at the right time, and if you're walking in that path, then you have that opportunity. And if I think back with Vivian Vance, we were able to find her sister down at Albuquerque, Luann Graham, and she sent the family album and then told all of the stories about her sister and the great stories and the memories she had of it. And when she shared that segment that's already aired was the first one, and it was a complete story. And I already liked Vivian Vance just from her part of an I Love Lucy show. But I really liked her afterwards, and the commitment that she made to her friends, and she never forgot those people who helped her along the way.
That's right, and it all originated in little old Cherryville, southeast Kansas. I think what makes most of these people so comfortable when we start our interviews is that they instantly realize they're a lot smarter than we are.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. They figured that out before we even started.
Yeah, and we just give them a general question and away they go. But there's one particular interview that I'm glad we did, and that was with General Seitz, because we got into his background and the time he spent in the war, in World War II, but bringing that information out, we got just a little bit of it. Much of his life he didn't even mention, because if I didn't know what to ask him, he wasn't going to volunteer it. Yeah. For example, he was at the Battle of the Bulge, but he was also at many other battles, incredible battles, some of the worst battles in World War II. He was in the middle of it. Yeah. And before he died, he said to me, "The good Lord owes me nothing."
Yeah. Dick Seitz was, of course, your neighbor over at Junction City. He was originally from Hiawatha, lived by you over in Junction, and boy, what a humble, classy fella. He has been so supportive of you and have been friends with you for years, and I am so honored that we had the chance to get that story from Dick Seitz.
Yeah,
it was
so
part
am I.
of the segment that we did. We did 3 straight shows concentrating on World War II and those people who served in it. We had Jim Sharp from White City, and man, what a story that was. Very few people had even heard of Jim Sharp. And another one of those, he was a humble man, farm kid up at White City, and joined the military, wound up in the Battle of the Bulge, wrote the book, Diary of an Infantryman,
Yeah.
and he wrote the book Sergeant of the Guard because he wound up being Sergeant of the Guard at the Nuremberg trials. And that's one of the segments you can see by going to our website at heywhateverhappenedto.org. And you'd be able to click on to Jim Sharp's story from White City. An excellent story, part of the war series. We're going to take a little break, pay a few bills, but when we come back, we're going to tell you about the other shows that we've done. So stay tuned.
Hey, whatever happened to you?
Welcome back to Hey, Whatever Happened To? The segment's a 30-minute show, and each show is a story about a new celebrity from Kansas or with a strong connection to Kansas. Roger, we just finished talking about Jim Sharp, and it was part of that military series that we did that included Jim Sharp and one that you did on Elton Murphy from Chapman, and then, of course, your dear friend, Lieutenant General Dick Seitz, or
Yeah.
Richard Seitz.
I remember the Elton's interview that we did with him, and something as tragic as the Battle of Iwo Jima and some of those things, it's still, there's so much humor in some of these things that happened, because he said, I ended up in the war because the fish weren't biting.
Yeah.
And he and his 2 cousins were from Louisiana, and the fish weren't biting that day, so one of the cousins says, why don't we join the Marines and go fight the Japs? So, I mean, and the worst, of course, the 2 cousins didn't get back, and Eldon was injured, and during this time when he was at Iwo Jima, he became friends with Ira Hayes.
Yeah.
They were in adjoining units, and Eldon saw him raise the flag over Mount Tarabachi. I think that was it.
I think it was.
And so the World War II series, and then you did an interview at the Eisenhower Center, and that kind of wrapped up some of that World War II stuff as well. And some of these things we learned by accident, like when we did the Emmett Kelly story. We thought Emmett Kelly was the clown that we remembered as kids. It wasn't.
Yeah.
That Emmett Kelly was Emmett Kelly Jr.
Right, that was his son, yeah.
And he served 3 years in the Navy in the Pacific, and was at Iwo Jima and some of those places. Just incredible stories we fall into and didn't even know it at the time.
What I found so interesting about this segment, and I'm sure the viewer will too, when you watch these, you'll be amazed with it as you look at the behind the scenes like we talked about with Vivian Vance, and you get to see some of the behind the scenes information about her. And if you've noticed at the introduction of our show with Hey, Whatever Happened To, that song was developed for us and sang by Darlene Austin out of Bennington. And she, of course, went on to have her own story, country western star out of Nashville, lives in Nashville now, a dear friend. She used to be a sponsor when I raced in the NASCAR Goodies Dash series. Just a wonderful person. And then if you take the, we grew up reading the same Topeka Daily Capital just like Jim Sharp did.
Sure.
But I find it really interesting that we get to this stage in our life, and then we wind up talking to people like Jim Sharp. And Jim Sharp, now he got to meet the Nazi leadership. With the exception of Hitler, he met number 2, number 3, Rudolf Hess. He met the generals, he met their chief of staff.
The head of all of the various forces that was that participated in World War II.
And then he brought in to us, he brought in his the memorabilia that he had. He had the SS rings, he had those things. And man, that's a piece of history. I've got a history degree in an undergraduate program, actually a master's program with it. And to see somebody who actually physically had control of those, met those people, talked to those people, it's fascinating. And then to know he's from the little town of White City and to know that story, our viewers gotta love stories like that.
What the one unique thing about his story, and where he disagreed with history, but we got it firsthand, was that who was it? Hess? Who was it that killed themselves, committed suicide the day?
Herman Goering.
Goering, and he said the official story was he had a a false tooth that had some narcotic in it, cyanide that would kill him. He said impossible, because he'd been to the dentist so many times. We took him to the doctor. He said there was an ink pen and a pad that was given to him the day before by a young girl, and he said he's convinced that there was something in the ink pen.
He knew the guy. He knew the guy that was a fellow guard with him, knew that whole story, put it in his book, the Sergeant of the Guard, and all of that was included in the book. So, you know, there's a transition period, because we were close to contemporaries, a little younger than, a little younger than Jim Sharp, but just to hear his stories and knowing he's from Kansas is fantastic. And then that interview session that you did with Eldon Murphy from Chapman. You know, I've seen Elton around a lot of times, but I never knew that story until at such time as you did that. And then his connection with Ira Hayes, because anybody who's astute about World War II would know that Ira was one of the ones who raised that flag, and there's a monument of it. Ira became famous in his own right with that. He was from the Indian Reservation, had issues with alcohol problems, and
he couldn't handle the fame. He could not handle the fame.
He never wanted the fame.
And as a matter of fact, Eldon did not even mention that he knew Ira Hayes until we did the interview, and it just came out. These folks they're so humble, they don't brag about anything. I mean, this greatest generation.
No, they're tremendous. I always enjoy every segment, and getting to listen to the one you did with Elton was fantastic. And then the one with Dick Seitz, that was so good, because if you've looked at any of the film footage from World War II, you have seen that segment where Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower at the time is talking to the paratroopers. Well, that was Dick Seitz's group. At least in part, probably almost all of it was his group. And there, General Eisenhower's talking to them, and the general said later, that was the toughest job I had to do that particular day, because I was committing really, really good paratroopers to launch behind the lines for the start of D-Day, and their job was to disrupt and prevent the German withdrawal, and to stop the German coming up to reinforce it, to tear up the lines of communications. And by his statement, he said, I anticipated 70% of those people would be casualties of the war, and to send those out, when he walked away from that, he had to literally wipe his eyes, because that was part of the job he had to do. But wow, what a task for him, and what a fantastic job Dick Seitz and all of those guys did on that D-Day invasion.
You know, and Seitz and Eisenhower and these Kansans were about the same. If you remember when that happened, there was no big formation. Here's a 4-star general, walks up there into a crowd of soldiers, paratroopers, and somebody bums a cigarette from him.
Yeah.
And it was
just gather around.
Gather around. And just a conversation, and that's just, I mean, that's who they were, the way they acted. It's incredible.
Yeah. We've got to take another break. We're going to pay a few bills, but come on back. We're going to tell you about the other shows that you'll see. Thanks for watching.
Say, whatever happened to you?
Welcome back to Hey, Whatever Happened To? And Roger, we're kind of doing a recap of the shows that we have done so far, along with the shows that the viewers are going to see coming up. I'm Doug Thompson, co-host Roger Thompson, and if you're just tuning into the show, we're talking about Hey, Whatever Happened To? And each week is a new segment on a celebrity either from Kansas or with a strong connection. And Roger, we've already talked about Vivian Vance, Jim Sharp, Elton Murphy, and Dick Seitz, General Dick Seitz. We also did one on Wild Bill Hickok, and that was a fantastic story. Wild Bill, of course, one of the more colorful people from the Western days in Abilene during its time of the trail drives, and that's a good story. We had a lot of good information on Wild Bill.
We didn't get off to a good start when you mentioned to the curator of the museum up at Deadwood that you were from Abilene and had a court order to exhume Wild Bill and bring him back.
Yeah, they were pretty concerned.
That
they
got
said,
their attention.
Yeah, I said, well, we've got it. We're coming up with a court order, and we're bringing back Wild Bill with us. And they said, no, this is our only tourist attraction. And they had all kinds of reasons. And finally, we couldn't keep a straight face anymore. So I told him, we don't have a court order, and we'll get one when we get there. But yeah, that was a good segment. I love that show that you did with Hugh Beaumont out of Lawrence.
I've said this before about the type of people that we interview. Hugh was born in Lawrence and was a major movie star in the 1940s. And when we were going to do that, of course he's not with us anymore, he died many years ago, we might as well go to the source, you said. I said, well, the source is the Beeve.
Yep, Jerry
So
Mathers.
I called up Jerry Mathers at...
well, don't give the phone number. Don't give the phone number.
I'm not going to give the phone number. How could I remember that? I barely remember my name.
Well, I didn't know where you were going with it.
No, I'm trying to think of the town the kid lives in. It's
California. Well, let's just call it California. There you go.
Capistrano. Anyway, I called him right out of the blue, and he said, I will be glad to talk about my friend Hugh Beaumont. And boy, did he ever.
Yeah.
And we did about an hour.
Yeah, a little over that, because you can get not only the segment that you can get on heywhateverhappenedto.org, but there's also bonus footage on that website. So even after you talked to the Beeve for the 30-minute program, you and he went on for about another 30 or 40 minutes, and that appears on the website as well.
Yeah, and he told us a lot about Hugh Beaumont that we did not know, being an ordained minister, that the type of guy he was, and the fact that he was such a big movie star, and that he and Jerry had met and done a commercial long before Leave It to Beaver ever started.
Yeah.
And just interesting people. But I mean, they're so willing to give of their time, and like I said, and I found out a short time later that Jerry had actually been in Abilene, had a function at the Eisenhower Center.
I remember that.
And everyone that met him said, what a class act, what a great guy we've got. And I'm afraid we've run out of people like that. Is there anything in our future?
No, you know, we have a lot in our future, but we've got a couple other shows that are coming out. One is on President Eisenhower, of course, from Abilene, and we did an interview with Carl Weisenbach at the Eisenhower Center, and that was a great show, because we could have done 5 shows or 10 shows on Eisenhower. We could have done them on each of the kids. That was a fantastic story. Commander-in-Chief of the during World War II on the D-Day invasion, Supreme Allied Commander, I think was his title, 5-star general, wound up being President of the United States, 34th President, and that facility in Abilene is absolutely beautiful. We did the one you mentioned earlier on Emmett Kelly from Sudan. Sudan's very proud of Emmett Kelly, but you know, coming up, we've got Hattie McDaniel, and Hattie McDaniel was in Gone with the Wind, and we had a guest host come in and did that, Nisha Mason. I would know her as Nisha Bailey. She used to be the mayor in Abilene, but now she's married, and it's Nisha Mason. She did a fantastic job. Hattie McDaniel has a whole story of her own. It's fantastic. We've got one coming up on Milburn Stone from Burton, Kansas. Milburn was
incredible.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
He was Doc Adams. Galen was his first name. Galen Adams, and what a history. And every time I look at one of these old Gunsmoke shows, I see him, he's just almost always on the verge of laughing. I mean, he enjoyed that role so much. And if you look at it, there's a lot of banter back and forth that I doubt was in the script, particularly with him and Dennis Weaver and
then Ken Curtis later.
And Ken Curtis later,
yeah.
And even with Matt, you know, this was always going on, and it's one of those deals where these guys are putting on a serious Western, but you have to think that oftentimes they're looking away from the camera, because this Doc Adams was just something else.
Yeah, you know, such things as with Doc Adams, I asked one of his relatives, who's a retired professor, I said, how did Doc get that little thing where he'd rub his chin like that all the time? And he said he got that from one of the uncles that we had, his uncle. And Milburn, he adopted that because he always thought that was so good, he'd rub his chin like that, like he was thinking. And he said Milburn did that. And we know a lot of behind the scenes about Milburn Stone. And it's a wonderful story, so you be sure you watch that one. We've also got Frank.
One other thing about Doc Adams, he was 5'9". He was 5'9", but when you put him up next to 6'4" Chester and 6'7" Matt,
with a hat and cowboy boots,
and cowboy boots, and all those people come in there, he ends up being about the size of Kitty.
Yeah.
And it's just funny, and there's a lot of things, and I think you're going to enjoy the show about Milburn.
You will. We've got a racing series coming up, and by that, kind of like we did with the military, we've got some racers that we're going to have segments on. We've got Clint Boyer from Emporia, and of course Clint may very well wind up being the NASCAR champion this year. He's in second as we film this program right now. Got Roger Ward out of Beloit, and Roger was a 3-time winner at the Indy 500. We've got a segment on Johnny Rutherford out of Coffeyville. that we're going to be working on. Johnny won the Indianapolis 500, and most people don't know this, but there's more Indy 500 winners from Kansas than any other state in the union.
Rick Mears down
Rick
there.
Mears, yeah.
And we've got a guy that outran them all
Yeah, he
and
did.
never got a single trophy or a dollar for doing it.
You're right. You're talking about Joe Engel from Chapman. He
Yes.
was the pilot on the X-15, and what a super story there. We've got a story on Frank Bellany coming up, who wrote the national anthem. Obviously, what you need to do is watch this show, Hey Whatever Happened To. Doug Thompson, Roger Thompson, thanks for watching. We'll see you for the second half of the series this year.
Bye, everybody.